Okay. Daniel Morin, you get a star or something. Every week, if one of you remembers about 14 minutes ago to ask me if we're recording, that would be really great. But all's not lost. Just working. Are we just barely? Yeah, that sounds good. Not yet. So at least what we went through is in the syllabus, and you were mostly here, all of you, almost all of you. So, uh, okay. So now we're recording. All right, onward to a big question. And this is another part that kind of is a back and forth with application. But many texts that you come across in the Bible invite us to ask a big question or may provide an answer to one. So, for example, Genesis, God creates everything, and He makes the garden, and He puts in the garden the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so, of course, that raises that gigantic question about the problem of evil, which happily we don't have any texts in Exodus that bring that up. But there are some big questions that the Exodus account raises, and in wanting you to spend some time paying attention to what those big questions might be and whether we get answers to them in Exodus or whether we have to go outside of Exodus to find some of those answers. One of the big questions that the whole book of Exodus writes has to do with the Exodus narrative as a paradigm or a model for everyone's salvation, and that's what comes up in the essay, which is next. So the very last assignment for the semester is the essay, and so as you can see here, write one essay on the subject of Exodus as paradigmatic, so a paradigm or a model. In other words, the big picture of what we see going on in the Exodus, from the characters involved, like the Pharaoh, to Israel being in bondage, to Moses being sent to liberate them, to the actual coming out of bondage, to the crossing of the Red Sea, to the wilderness wandering, and so forth. What does that, how does that relate to or parallel or indicate how things go in the big way for all of us? Timothy Norton, go ahead and either put it in chat or turn your mic on.
So, I mean, you just mentioned like 4 or 5 big paradigms. Would we want to like choose one? Like, say, for example, you could do baptism, the Red Sea crossing.
Yes, thanks for asking that, Timothy. No, actually, what I want is the whole package. So in your essay, I would want you to identify as comprehensively as possible what's going on with the Exodus. Now, having said that, I mean, that maybe that sounds scary. Like I'm asking you to write a whole doctrine of Christianity on the basis of Exodus, and I think actually you could do that. But I'm looking more for the, let's say, the big picture. So, like I mentioned, who are the main characters, and what do they parallel in real life, in the bigger picture, and what are the main events that are going on, and what do they parallel? So just, I mean, not to give too much away, but how can you miss it? There's obviously a type or a paradigm or model of baptism in the Red Sea crossing, and you can't miss that because Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians 10. There's obviously an indication of the Lord's Supper in the Passover meal, which precedes it, and which Jesus, concludes in Luke 22, having the last Passover and replacing it with the Lord's Supper. The 40 years wandering in the wilderness is a parallel to, the Christian life in the world. So, without saying more than that, and I know it's just an essay, but I'm asking you to kind of do two things at once. In broad strokes, what are the big pieces of the Exodus narrative and the major players? And then in at least one detail each, how do they parallel, or what kind of information or indication do they give us for the Christian life, or the redemption of humanity in particular. So I want you to have a lot of freedom on this. I want you to have fun with it, especially exploring ideas. And then I hope that you find it fun. I know it's taxing, but fun to try and take all of the ideas that you have and the parallels that you see, and then do that difficult work of organizing them, and in some kind of a way that is most productive for the reader. So in a sense, you could say, if you had a person that didn't know anything about Christianity, and you only had time or opportunity to share with them the Exodus story, so kind of like you would read the Exodus story in a children's Bible story book, okay, how would you unpack or explain the parallels of that Exodus story in the life of any person who's redeemed by God? Something like that. So it's an essay, and it's meant to just be a kind of an interesting study for you, and I hope help you actually use then Exodus in the future to do just that, to help people understand the parallels in the Christian life, and get the benefit of those. And then, of course, there's a final exam, and so that you don't have to worry about surprises, the final exam questions are drawn out of the quiz questions, so you will have seen them all at least once, and then we'll just check on your memory at the end of this semester. So by the way, up at the very top of the screen here, this page from the syllabus, so there's the textbook I required. Just looking down this side panel here, some notes I made about the syllabus. So if you didn't already know this, when it comes to research, one good source gets you all the rest of the sources you might need, which is why I required this commentary. And I don't know if you're, some of you may be interested in building a library and like to have commentaries as a part of that. And there's different reasons to have different commentaries by different authors, but the Word Biblical Commentary is one I recommend for a couple of reasons. One is it does pay attention to the original text and some critical kinds of details, technical things that a person would want to pay attention to. Even if you're not going to pay attention to it, it's important that it's in there. The second it is actually the second reason after that, is if you look in the Word Biblical Commentary, in each section, the very first thing in each section that you come to is a bibliography. And so, and then a translation of the text, and then notes and so forth. But in this bibliography, and the reason I like this commentary series is because they've done that hard research work for you. So you can look through the series of titles of journal articles or of books that have been written and find, probably, well, certainly good quality academic work that's been done on different subjects in this section of text. Don't let it put you off if you see lots of titles of things in German or French, and maybe some of you can make something of that, and that's good. But there's plenty of titles in English about things going on in the text that you might be interested in, and this is what I'm getting at too. So maybe this commentary only has one reference to something in this particular section of text. For example, in Exodus 4:10 through 17, I'm looking in the commentary here. I'm on page 47. The last entry in the bibliography is references the author Widengren, Widengren, first letter of first name G, and he wrote an article called "What Do We Know About Moses?" and it's in a publication called Proclamation and Presence. It was published in 1983. Chances are there's a bibliography that goes with that article, and that will be true for any of these other books or articles that are in the commentaries bibliography. So that's what I mean is the commentary gets you a start of references, and those references in this commentary are going to be great resources for more if you want to study more on a subject. So that's what the textbook is about. When you're working on your presentation, you don't necessarily have to import things from the commentary to prove that you actually read it or used it. Um, but you will want to be reading the commentary on your section just to see if you're not missing something or to see if something is said that you would want to make us aware of. Lucas, please.
Hey, Professor. First of all, thank you for teaching us. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Could you share, and I don't know, so it's not a loaded question, every, book has a bias or a presupposition or a particular angle or bent. Could you quickly summarize what would be the particular bent or bias or presuppositions underlying the
Sure, thank you. It's a
word,
good question.
vis-a-vis a Concordia commentary?
Right. Okay, so that's a good question. So a Concordia commentary series is going to be very upfront about its presuppositions. There's going to be LCMS and the people that were chosen to write the various commentaries, like a bunch of the Old Testament was written by Andy Steinman, who was my colleague for 14 years when I was at River Forest. He is as straight a shooter as they come, and so you can expect Andy to take the text very seriously as absolutely reliable and historical and all that. In a series like this, where you have a much more diverse population of authors, so the Word Biblical Commentary series wasn't as interested in advocating for a particular stance on the biblical text as it was in finding the very best authors in terms of expertise and background and so forth in a particular text. So two things, I guess, to say about the Word Biblical Commentary. One, it's going to be more modern than not. So it's not going to read like Steinman or Luther or some other LCMS brother. It's going to pay a lot of attention to what's going on in modern scholarship from a modern scholarship's viewpoint. So you have to be careful in what you read. On the other hand, because it's not generated by a particular school of thought, it's not going to be continually banging some certain drum, trying to prove, some anti-theological or anti-biblical or anti-patriarchal, trendy theory that's going on. And so I guess in that respect, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds too. So it's good scholarship. It gives you good reference material to pursue. For the other kind of material that we're interested in referencing when it comes to our biblical studies, I have these other two texts to suggest. So good question, and thanks for reminding me to clarify that. So if you look down the side column here again on the first slide, so references to ancient Christian commentary and Luther's works. I didn't require these because one book's enough to require, but there are two sources that I'd like you to keep your eye on. One of them is, of course, Luther's works, but what you'll notice is if you go shopping for Luther's works on the book of Exodus, you won't find any. So he has, I'm just looking here, eight volumes on Genesis, 0 on Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then he jumps back in Deuteronomy. Nevertheless, if you have the index, the last volume of Luther's works, 55, I think it is, and you look in the scripture index, there's plenty of references in Luther to Exodus, and so you can make use of that. One thing I don't want you to be disappointed when the time comes, though, is guess what? I went looking in Luther's works for references to the bones of Joseph, and there's nothing there. So that was very interesting to me, that either Luther didn't know what to do about it, or he didn't think it was worth doing something about, and so he just didn't spend any time talking about it. The ancient Christian commentary on the Bible, if you're unfamiliar with it, let me just kind of hold it up here to the camera. So it kind of looks like, maybe that the visual quality is not very good, but this is an extraordinary undertaking, and I'm really happy that it exists. So the ancient Christian commentary on the Bible, I was just looking up who's the publisher here. InterVarsity Press, no surprise. InterVarsity is generally a good source of materials. But anyway, what they did then is different editors were selected for different sections of the Bible, and they went through the early church father materials. So what did Christian authors and theologians from the first 3 centuries or so have to say about biblical texts? And so it's excerpts from these individuals' writings. Wow, what a fantastic treasury that is. So again, there has always been an index, scripture index, to the early church fathers series, but that's a lot of work to go hunting through the index and then work your way back through the volumes to find out what they said. This work fast tracks that for you. So if you get volume 3, or if you find it in a library, or it may be even possible, David, don't get discouraged, I'll be right with you. It's maybe even possible that if you find it on Amazon and it has the look inside feature, that you can actually look inside of the volume. It's volume 3. It includes Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. But you can go to, it's kind of section by section, find the section you're interested in, and see if by chapter and verse one or more excerpts from some ancient Christian commentary is there. Joseph, I'll answer you right after I call on David. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just wondering what you say, or which of the church fathers might you recommend we pay the most attention to?
Well, that's a good question, and of course then it depends on kind of what subject we're talking about, or what book of the Bible we're talking about, or some combination. So for our purposes, it's more important that if you access the ancient Christian commentary on the scriptures for Exodus, it's more important for you to assess the utility of the excerpts you find there. So for example, you may find a text in Exodus you're interested in. It's in this ancient Christian commentary, and maybe there's 3 excerpts from 3 different early church fathers on that section of text. You may read one of those excerpts and say, well, it sure is fascinating to know what, Ambrose said about this text, but I don't think he's really contributing much that's helpful to us, and sometimes that's the case. On the other hand, you might find another excerpt from somebody you've never heard of, and I don't know what name to throw out there as an example, but you might say, wow, that early church father had some tremendous insight into what was going on in Exodus, or what we should understand about it, or how we should apply it, and you want to share that with the rest of the group. So yeah, Joseph was asking, so what's the name again? It's right here on this slide, Ancient Christian Commentary on Scripture. So it actually has 2 more words. Ancient Christian Commentary on Scripture, and it goes volume by volume. Some volumes are only one or part of one book of the Bible, but in our case, Exodus is in with Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and it's volume number 3. Okay, so as by way of background then, or referencing for you, you don't have to go hunting everywhere. So you have the textbook for the class, the Word Biblical Commentary. You have Luther's works by way of the scripture reference in volume 55, and then you have the Ancient Christian Commentary on the Bible, and the excerpts that it provides for you. Given time constraints that you have, because I think all of you are busy with doing other things, definitely start with the textbook for the class, because you should have that with you. And then let me just say, as time permits, I'd go to Luther next just to check, and then the Ancient Christian Commentary if you still have time or interest. Okay, next about the assignments then. So when it comes to your section of text that the syllabus schedule indicates, and I'll be revising that, but let me just say this. For those of you whose name is already on the syllabus, I won't be upsetting that. So if you've already started work, or if you'd like to get started, don't worry about revisions of the syllabus affecting you. I won't change any of you that are already there. I'll just be removing students if they're actually not in the class, and I'll be including students that are not there now but need to be included. And so what you're doing then is preparing for 50 minutes in advance. I want you to prepare it in a PowerPoint so you can go slide by slide, and I need that in advance. So I'm going to say at least 24 hours in advance of when we're going to look at your section of text. I need your PowerPoint. And then as you're doing your research and your preparations, I want you to keep your mind in these two places. On the one hand, we're interested in scholarship. On the other hand, we're interested in that scholarship being of service to the people that we care about. Yeah, Molina.
On the syllabus, are you referring to the different syllabus? The syllabus that I downloaded from the website or from the class of Blackboard page does not really have a name as a presented. Am I missing that?
Let me. It should look like this.
It's the one from the class of Blackboard that I just downloaded the other day. I just went back and checked. It does not have any names in it, so just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Well, thanks for pointing that out. Well, then none of you have to worry about your getting moved, because you didn't know you were in there yet. So, so that's what tonight's for. We're finding all these things out, and so I will make revisions in the textbook tonight or first thing in the morning, and I will email it to all of you, besides posting the new version in Blackboard. So you'll know when the schedule is revised when you get it in an email, and that will be very soon. So just to put your minds at ease a little bit, I wanted to get started with looking at the text tonight, but Monday I'm actually going to start cold, if you will, on Exodus 1 verse 1, and sort of just let you come with me to get a feel for how to approach the text and how to work on it and how to put it together in a way that you can present to the rest of the class in 50 minutes. So we'll get the schedule fixed and the syllabus updated, and then we're on our way. I mentioned the essay already, and then we have the we're on Blackboard Collaborate. So if you look at the grades then, so points for the observations that you send class period by class period that turn into quizzes, and then the quizzes themselves, and then the presentation that you do in 50 minutes time, and then the essay, and then the final exam. So any questions about this? We spent a lot of time on this slide, but we need to. Gregory, please.
Thanks. I was just wondering how often we're going to be posting observations.
You'll want to make one observation for each section of text that we look at, and there are, let me just check quick, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There are 16 sections of text. So 16 times in these next 10 weeks, so kind of twice a week, you'll be posting one observation about the section of text that we looked at together. Yes?
Okay, so pretty much like every Monday, every Thursday, we should be posting something, basically.
Correct, and probably the best way to go about that is, if you have the time, as soon as we end our session on any given evening, just spend a minute reflecting on the text that we looked at and compose your observation and post it on Blackboard, and then you're in good shape. Yeah. Okay, very good. Let's try a new slide. We've been almost 40 minutes on that one. By the way, for those of you, we had class together before, and that was on Adobe. And I don't know if you've had classes on Blackboard Collaborate. I think probably you have. But one of the nice things is the recordings are automatically in Blackboard. So you can always go back and re-listen to or look at the slides again from the sessions that we have together. So it just automatically builds session after session in Blackboard, and those are accessible to you. Okay, a little bit more about the essay and my ideas for asking you about that. So as you can see here, Exodus is paradigmatic. I mean, the Exodus is referred to all over the place in the Bible, and that's one of my reasons for asking you to think about it as a paradigm and then write an essay about it, so you have some time to explore that idea. One kind of text that makes us think about it is this text from John 8:31, where Jesus is, wrangling, arguing with the religious establishment, Pharisees. Jesus just got done saying, "If you remain in my word, you're genuinely or truly my disciples, and you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free." And then they respond, "We're Abraham's offspring and have never been in bondage to anyone." So the key word here, bondage, that would trigger our thought, and of course, obviously, not only thinking back to the Roman Empire, I'm working backwards, or the Babylonian Empire or the Assyrian Empire, but even if somehow they argued their way out of that, how are you going to argue your way out of the bondage in Egypt? So something matters about the experience of Israel in Egypt as described in the Exodus, and the religious establishment is ignoring it or trying to ignore it. A second example, so in Acts 7, when you listen to Stephen's apology before he gets stoned, so I don't recommend following his example because it didn't work out very well for him, but you'll notice his reference to the Exodus in that narrative. Then, of course, you come to 1 Corinthians 10, and the Exodus is referred to very obviously. So the Father's under the cloud, passed through the sea. There's the baptism word in Moses in the cloud and in the sea, supernatural food and drink and so forth. And then these bookends, these things were written down as warnings for us, and again in 11, these things were written as warnings for us. And then the content in between those bookends, referencing some things that go on that are in the narrative in Exodus. Not all of this is in Exodus, but enough, especially this one. The people sat down to eat and drink, rose up to play. That's Exodus 32. So just 3 examples of biblical texts. These 3 happen to all come out of the New Testament that give us an indication, each in its own way, that something of extraordinary magnitude is happening as a model or paradigm in Israel's experience in the Exodus. Okay, now how to go hunting for references to the Exodus or Israel and Egypt and that sort of thing. Okay, if you do a search for the word Egypt in the Bible, so there it is, Egypt, you'll see I can just make out, I think it's like 809 times the word Egypt is used in the Bible. Now, there's a couple of things to think about when you see a number like that. First of all, there must be something going on with Egypt, because 809 times is a lot of times. And especially if you scroll quickly through the places where Egypt is referred to and realize that a lot of them are in Old Testament books or New Testament books that are a long, long way from being referred to because we're in the middle of the Egyptian narrative. Okay, so we have that going on. The other thing that I'm pointing out at the bottom here is in how many other ways could we search for references to the Exodus as a paradigm? Let me see if I did that. Yeah. So, for example, let me just go back a second because I want to show you something. Some places in the Bible refer to Egypt as the land of Ham. And so if you were doing a concordant search on Egypt, even though you have 809 occurrences of the word Egypt, that doesn't mean you have them all. You'd also need to look for places where the land of Ham is referred to, because that's talking about Egypt. Okay, so to think about other ways, if you look for the word bondage, you'll find that John 8 reference, but you also have to keep in mind how many different synonyms there are. So anytime you see the word slave in the Bible, or slavery, or hard service, or lots of different concepts like that, those are going to have something to do with what we're interested in learning from Exodus. Again, Egypt and its synonyms, not just the land of Ham, but also sometimes it's referred to the iron furnace where Israel was held captive. Pharaoh as a major player in the Exodus narrative. And what are the synonyms for Pharaoh, or in how many other ways? How many other kinds of people are Pharaoh-like? I guess I should put it that way. So, for example, in some ways, Herod of the New Testament, the end of the Old Testament and the New Testament, Herod is a kind of a New Testament Pharaoh. Pontius Pilate bears some resemblance to Pharaoh. So you can kind of work out, okay, conceptually, there are a lot of parallels through the whole biblical narrative of a Pharaoh type person. And then, of course, plagues, and how many synonyms might there be for plagues, or what's going on with plagues, or even for the individual plagues. So, what's going on with frogs, and what's going on with lice and gnats and boils and all those different kinds of things. Each one of those can take you in a different direction. So whichever of you is assigned to the section of Exodus that records the plagues, you'll have to kind of decide which and how many of those tangents you want to pursue, because a person could spend a good long time working on the significance not only of each plague individually, but of references or connections it makes with other places in the Bible, and maybe even with the progression. So maybe some of you have already thought about this, that is there some kind of progression from plague to plague that we should be paying attention to? Not just that God hits, another right cross to Pharaoh's jaw by God, but actually there's a kind of import that's growing each time, which Pharaoh should have been paying attention to, but was resisting, that sort of thing. Okay, so here's that picture of the schedule, and so you're telling me that the names haven't been put in place here, and I will take care of that very soon. Notice the essay's due date here. Also, just notice in the schedule, I am traveling April 6th and 10th, and so rather than trying to wonder if I can find a place to hold class with you virtually, I just thought, you know what, probably by then you guys are going to be ready for a breather, or just give you some space to work on your research if you haven't presented yet, or to get this essay worked on. So we kind of have two breathers in here. So we'll go some sessions here, and then we have 2 periods off for spring break, and then we'll go sprint again here for a little bit, and then another week off, and then we'll finish out the semester. So I hope you find that agreeable and helpful. And and you'll notice up here, so this is tonight, making introductions and getting started, and then next week I'm taking responsibility for the first chunk of text, so that you all have some time to think about what to do and how to do it and approach your text. And that gives the days between Monday and Thursday for the next presenter to kind of shape up their information and move on. All right, let's see if we want to tackle one more thing. No, let's take a break then. It's 6:50. Let's take a break for 10 minutes. Yeah, get up and move around if you're not used to doing that, because it's really helpful. And then we'll come back and I'll work you through. This is posted on Blackboard, at least it's supposed to be. I'll check all that soon. So if you haven't seen this already, it's there for you to see, and I'll talk about it when we come back in about 10 minutes or 9 now. Okay, see you soon.